From New Times issues. How about that?
Or a thorium plant.
It's just pure mischief, that's all.
Then when do you guys come back?
Friday night
Okay.
for the Arizona Blockathon. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. My name's Jay Carpenter. I'm the founder of Desert Blockchain, and I'm also a member of the Arizona Blockathon group that puts on the event that's happening this Saturday, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that tonight, but thank you for being here tonight. The intention of Desert Blockchain is to build community, and you being here tonight is part of that community building. So who's here for the first time? Awesome, very cool. So there's some more people streaming in, and you know, every time we have one of these, it seems like about 50% of the people are here for the first time. So really, really awesome. So let me lay a little groundwork. First of all, this is being recorded, and if somebody could check, go to desertblockchain.com, make sure that it's live streaming and that the audio is okay, I'd appreciate it. And anyway, and if somebody could check, go to I love to hear myself talk. So Desert Blockchain's been going for over 3 years now. And we talked a lot about blockchain, and a lot of people are really excited about the possibility of blockchain. But I think we've reached a point where it's time to build some stuff. And we're going to be focusing on use cases, what we call use cases, as well as events where developers can get together and learn from one another and start to share what they know and what they're finding out. And so it's all kind of, we're all kind of progressing together. And let's build some stuff. Even if it doesn't work, even if it's not right, even if it's flawed, whatever, let's build some stuff. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be going over at least one use case, and we'll be talking about how Saturday is going to come together and basically look at, you know, what can we build above and beyond cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a big, big deal. Don't get me wrong. It's like the first killer app, but personally, I'd like to see us start to move into applications that might incorporate cryptocurrency, but also do other things. So we're going to be talking about a potential use case where we build a title registry for automobile registrations tonight. And anyway, are there any questions or comments or things you'd like to cover tonight before we get started? A note of interest just across the hall is the Arizona Cyber Warfare Range, which is an awesome resource. They're doing some cutting edge cybersecurity over there. And we are interested in working with not only the Arizona Cyber Warfare Range, but anybody that's interested in cybersecurity. So that's part of where the collaboration and the community can come in. So
I have a little announcement that I learned last night from them as well. They're going to open their third location at 14th Street and Van Buren. They're just signing papers and there has to be remodeling done and stuff, but so the date isn't set, but that will also be a type of a galvanized place too. So it'll be cybersecurity warfare range themselves, plus some open work areas for startups and tech firms.
cool. That's awesome.
That's the old pickle factory. For those of us who have been here forever and ever and ever, it's the pickle factory.
There's all kinds of puns and jokes.
I know, really. And as they open, we'll probably make all.
I'll leave it to your imagination. So. Anyway, so let's see, what else is there to cover? I would like to announce that Jason Horton is part of a really awesome startup called Nori. And Jason and I are going to be flying out. We're going to be leaving right at 8:30 tonight. My wife will be here, Cindy, and she's going to be cleaning up and so forth. But Jason and I are flying up to Seattle for the first, well, I guess, is it the first Reversapalooza?
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yeah.
first Reversapalooza. Anything you want to say about that?
We're going to be going up there. It'll be I think we've been working on this since, let's say, like, just before mid-September of last year. A carbon market, so the ability to trade carbon certificates on the Ethereum blockchain. And we'll be doing a kind of soft launch over the next 2 days. So 2-day event out there, and we'll be demoing some of the code, some of the actual platform, the application, and then also having just a panel of experts in climate change and carbon removal technologies. So carbon sequestration and how to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. And then just talking about different methodologies and open source technology around that space. So that'll be going over for the next couple days. So pretty exciting.
Is that going to be live streamed?
I still don't know. I've not really been keeping up with that. I know it'll definitely be recorded in some way. I just don't know if it's going to be live stream.
So people can follow along at nori.com, NORI.com.
Yeah, the actual agenda I think is nori.com/Reversapalooza. A little hard to spell probably.
Yep. So, and then we'll be flying back for the Arizona Blockathon, the second Arizona Blockathon.us on Saturday, which will be right here. And for those of you that might not know what that is or what it was, basically you can go on Meetup and you can see what the schedule is. It is designed for people who have software development skills, at least 1 year of software development skills, and or you're a web designer. We would love to get more designers involved, but we'll have 4 talks in the morning, 30 minutes each, and we'll be covering different topics in blockchain. And then the last one will be about kind of team dynamics and things like that. And then we'll break into teams and go to lunch, come back. There'll be a secret assignment or secret parameters that will be unveiled, and they're very simple. And then basically the teams will collaborate for about 3 hours from like 1 to 4 and start projects, come up with projects. We'll also have at least one use case for them to consider to adopt, which we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. And then come back and they'll present. And then we will be we'll be scoring and voting the team presentations on a blockchain construct, which Julian and Jason and Marcus are working to put together. So that should be pretty cool. Another hands-on application of blockchain. So anybody have any questions about that?
Is the public invited to come and see the presentation later in the day, or is that just for judges?
That's a good idea. I kind of like that idea.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I think like after 4 o'clock, we'll open it up to the public. And it is going to be live streamed and recorded. And the first Arizona Blockathon we had was on February 3rd, and it was in this room and throughout this building. We had about 43 people showed up. We had about 23 people that broke into teams, up to 5 people per team. We had 5 teams, and we had 5 projects and 3 of which had working code by the end of the day, which was pretty awesome. So we had a document asset management, that Julian was the captain of that team. We had a polling application. We had a gun safety application, firearm safety, a fitness application, and we had, the last one was like a collaborative workspace application for tracking usage as well as rewards. So that's kind of the example, kind of gives you a feel for what we do at the Arizona Blockathons. And in the future, we're going to be inviting companies and organizations to submit use cases that the teams can choose to adopt and maybe start a prototype. And the idea is to get some funding behind the prototypes so that the prototypes could be developed over a 6-month period on a part-time basis. At this point, we don't have anybody putting up a bounty to provide funding for any of the use cases yet, but that's the intention, so that we can really build community, we can build the technical talent here in town, and we can create some prototypes that not only the developers in the community are working on, but also they could collaborate with some of the companies and organizations that are in town. So we start to build this collaboration between our developer community, our designer community, and organizations and companies that are interested in experimenting with blockchain. And so anyway, that's how it's been going. I'm still feeling my way along in this process to get use cases to emerge. One thing that I have run into, which I would like to throw it out to the community and kind of get your feedback, is there's a lot of resistance around putting an idea out there that's some company or some individual's idea that is going to be open source. So it's kind of hard to communicate that open source is the essence of blockchain. I mean, real blockchain. So that's probably been my biggest barrier so far in terms of presenting the possibility of creating a use case and putting it out there. So it's something for us to ponder and maybe look at, but that's probably been the biggest hurdle so far. So any other questions or comments? All right, well, let's go right into a use case so you can kind of see what a use case looks like. And this has been an interesting process because Matt Oxendale, who's one of the members of the entity behind ArizonaBlockathon.us, is an automobile dealer, and his family has dealerships in northern Arizona. And he came to myself and Elio Grieco, who's another member, and he said, hey, I've got this idea for a use for automobile dealerships. And so we sat down with him and we looked at it and we go, Matt, you know what? This really isn't a blockchain application. What you want to do can be done on a centralized database and a centralized software platform. But then that sparked this other idea, which looks like it is pretty ideal for a blockchain application. And as we did a little research, we found out that others are working on this idea of a automobile title registry. So the point that I want to make is just sitting down and going through a use case, I think could save people a lot of time and a lot of effort, maybe a lot of money, where they think that there's some sort of application that's useful on the blockchain, and it might be better just to do it in a conventional development, centralized client-server process. So that was just kind of one of the things that we uncovered. So Matt, you want to come on up and talk about the use case that you got? And we're going to start it off with a video because we found in the process that others have already looked at this use case and started to think about how this could fit with a blockchain construct. So you want to say anything more about that, or you want to just?
Well, just as Jay said, yeah, I have a few car dealerships up in northern Arizona, so obviously I have some firsthand knowledge of the title transference process for our automobiles in this state. But I think a little bit what's good about talking about this case is it impacts all of us. It impacts nearly all of us. Most of us are going to buy, sell a car at some point, have to register it. So this is actually something real tangible that we can talk about, potentially use today rather than just a concept that we can't really bring to reality. So even though maybe motor vehicle titles isn't the most sexy thing in the world, it impacts our lives. And so this is something where we may be able to actually use it on a real use case. I'm gonna have, like Jay said, I'm gonna have him play a video of another company that's looked at this as well, because frankly, it's simple and they just do a good job kind of laying it out and teeing up the conversation. So let's go ahead and play that.
Okay, bear with me just a moment. As I short out the entire system with static electricity. Okay. Okay, let's see if this will work.
Blockchain is a technology that enables the secure recording, management, and sharing of all types of information. It is set to have a significant impact on several government operations. One area in which the greatest potential gains have been identified is the registration process for property, such as motor vehicles. The process of buying a vehicle today is complex and time-consuming. The same data is input multiple times into separate systems used by auto dealers, lenders, insurers, and various departments of motor vehicles. Additional verification often requires visits to a DMV office and conversations with an insurance agent, and data sharing between these parties and with other government agencies such as law enforcement is often slow, manual, and complicated. Blockchain has the power to transform this process for each of the parties involved. With blockchain, data is secure and only accessible through a special key based on permission level. Updates happen close to real time, providing rapid access to the latest data. Costs can be lowered through reduced transaction time, simplified data interfaces, and less manual oversight. And increased transparency and security can help to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. KPMG's blockchain team has already shown how the technology can be used for routine DMV transactions. Imagine a system where every vehicle record becomes part of a blockchain when it rolls off the production line. This record includes manufacturer details like make, model, and price, and is transferred to the dealer. Once sold, the record with relevant customer data is shared with the DMV. The DMV checks the vehicle's history, verifies driver details, and confirms registration of the vehicle to the customer, instantly assigning license plates and creating new records such as title, registration, and insurance cards. Continued updates to the vehicle record facilitate manufacturer recalls and insurance claims. With borderless information sharing, law enforcement and regulatory agencies can securely query the data, confident that they're seeing the latest and most complete version of any vehicle's title, registration, and insurance status. KPMG is a leading advisor to government with extensive federal, state, and local experience in harnessing the latest innovations and technology. Let KPMG show you how blockchain can help transform the way you record and manage property registration data, enabling you to better serve your citizens.
All right. So I just wanted to start off that video. It gives a bit of a comprehensive view of the idea. They've actually gone a little bit further than I have myself, even tying it back to the manufacturing, starting the blockchain there. But what we'll do if you could pull up that document, we'll go just through a couple pages here, got them broken up into sections. And so I'll just kind of go over these with you and maybe take a little pause after each section. Would love to hear your questions, comments. If you got hey, this might be a problem, how this works, hey, speak up. I'm not a developer, but been able to talk with a few individuals, and we're trying to just flesh this thing out right now. So you can see there at the start, use case to develop a blockchain software that streamlines the Arizona motor vehicle title system for transference, integrity of data, long-term archiving. So the first thing I went through is trying to define the problems that we encounter with our current motor vehicle title system. So they're starting with MVD offices, generally have long wait times for individuals. I gotta imagine some people in this room have had some pretty bad wait times. I know up north where my dealerships are, they just started removing the chairs out of the waiting area for the motor vehicle.
That'll make you go faster.
Right? I think they're trying to get people not to come into the facilities
Wait,
anymore.
whose chairs? Our chairs or the chairs that are people working there?
The chairs for the waiting area of the customers. Yeah, yeah. How about that? We got human errors from individuals and individuals coming in to register their vehicle and the workers at the motor vehicle offices. That's not a dig against them. That's whenever you got humans processing paperwork, it's going to happen. Currently, motor vehicle archives everything on film, which is a cumbersome process when you need to do error correction, when you need to pull that out. You got a minimum of about 2 weeks. Sometimes it can take longer than that to pull the film and try to do some kind of error correction. I think that's, again, where doing a blockchain audit of the title would be so much quicker in this case. Yeah, see there's step 4, takes weeks, it's manual labor pulling the film for auditing. Paper titles can be lost or destroyed. Maybe one or more of you have experienced that in this room. I see it all the time. People have that car for years, they paid it off, they tuck it into the filing cabinet, they move, whatever, goes away, disappears, all kinds of different things happen with the titles. You can get a duplicate title. That costs a little bit of money, it's more processing for the state, and that whole system of getting a duplicate title opens us up for so much fraud in the state. You may not know this, I should touch on this. When you get a duplicate title for your vehicle, it supersedes the past title. Makes all other titles irrelevant, whatever's the most current title. And I'll talk in just a moment about how that leads to all kinds of fraud schemes. This is an interesting one that most people don't know about, but dealers and individuals cannot see when an ADOT lien will prevent the title from being transferred. So lien, that's just when you finance your vehicle, the lender has a loan on the vehicle. They have a right to that collateral. That's a lien, in case you're not familiar with that. Those will show up on the title. You'll be able to verify those online if you are purchasing that vehicle from a private party. The real tricky part that I run into all the time in my business, and I'm sure private party individuals, if you go to ADOT's website, they have all kinds of warnings about this, but they don't have a good solution yet. And it's that ADOT regularly puts not random, but liens on the VINs, on the titles for these vehicles, prohibiting them from being transferred. The individual doesn't know it. When you're transferring the title, you don't know it until ADOT says, no, you can't transfer that. You got a $500 lien against it. What are these? Child support liens, different types of restitution liens, an abandoned vehicle fee, different stuff that the state, the government gets involved in. They'll just tack it onto your vehicle, and you'll find out when you go to trade it in, when you go to sell that vehicle to another individual. Or that private party buys the vehicle, and now they're stuck with a non-transferable title. Motor vehicle offices, there's a lot of brick and mortar offices across the state. They're not particularly small. They got to encompass big waiting areas for all of us to be corralled in, right? And they're pretty inefficient. I have a friend that owns a third-party title company up in northern Arizona. He's told me stories about his staff having to go train at motor vehicle. These motor vehicle offices are quite inefficient in the manual labor, and they actually are incentivizing private companies to do the same work and privatize it because it's run more efficiently. You see that line there? They'll actually pay 2% of VLT. That's vehicle license tax. That's our registration fees. But VLT is vehicle license tax. ADOT will actually pay these private companies 2% to process the work so that motor vehicle doesn't happen. And they're encouraging these companies to do this. Motor vehicles are trying to shift this work off of them. It's a tough problem for them. Multiple ways to attempt fraud in person-to-person sales. Even though I'm a car dealer, I've never bought or sold an actual vehicle with 4 wheels for myself and probably never will. I've bought and sold several motorcycles, private party over Craigslist, my wife and I. And that is just scary what people would do selling their own vehicle. I don't know if you've been in this, if you've been fallen victim. First thing, 2 individuals meet, here's money, here's the title. Great, this title could be no good. They can go to motor vehicle and get the most current title and supersede that one. Better yet, go online while that vehicle is being sold and just verify that is the most current title. Great, you sold it. That person runs the motor vehicle, and in 15 minutes, they've superseded your title. All kinds of things can happen with that. You can supersede a title with a bill of sale. I've been frauded a few times at the dealership. We have to get an ADOT detective involved. He has to pull film. We got to track the paperwork. It's a mess. It takes months to sort out. Again, another way to do it is if you got a title and the lien's not showing on there. Maybe there's a restitution lien, ADOT is put in there. It could be another way they did it. Maybe they refinanced the vehicle after they were already holding a free and clear title. They got a lot of different ways for individuals to be fraud in person-to-person sales. And ADOT doesn't have solutions for that. They just give you all kinds of warnings and advice on the website, basically saying, come to a motor vehicle office so you make sure you don't run into these problems. So that's just a list, probably not 100% complete, but a pretty good start of the actual problems we have in our current motor vehicle title system. So myself and like Jay was mentioning, a few of us others were able to get together and start brainstorming on some solutions that blockchain can bring to this. So let me run through these and I'll take a brief pause, see if you guys have any questions or comments to add to this. So some of the solutions, again, speed to process the title transfer. I mean, we're still dealing with paper titles instead of electric titles. I realize there's electronic records stored with the state and that's put on film, but we're still dealing with these paper titles and we have to do a manual process person to person. I have a whole title department at my dealerships with multiple title clerks. What do? They process paperwork all day, then send it over to motor vehicle, and motor vehicle processes paperwork all day, actual hard paper. And we generate thousands upon thousands of these documents to be archived permanently and on film. So again, really something we could speed up there, digitizing the title system. Eliminate the wait times at motor vehicle. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I think with the increasing the speed, the ability to transfer titles, we could start eliminating some brick and mortar locations for the state. I put that in there as a positive because I think ultimately if we could build a use case, build a prototype here, we can approach the state about this. And that would be, I think, real attractive to them. They've already, they've made some moves to reduce costs with their brick and mortar locations across the state. I think if we could come in and actually give them the ability to close a number of locations, that could be millions of dollars of savings. We could really get our state pretty interested in something like this. Interactive software for individuals, dealerships, and third parties. ADOT has some of this on their website, but it's limited in how much you can see, interact with, how quick it is. And almost every query you're going to do on their site, they're going to charge you a small fee for it. $4, $1.50 or something like that. Still a nuisance, a pain in the butt that we got to pull out the credit card and do something like that. I think we ought to have a blockchain that is transparent, that individuals alike, dealerships, third party, the state as well, should have a transparent system. We can view, audit, correct these things at any given time. I believe I had touched on the liens already. Again, you can search liens for motor vehicles. The problem with it is not the vehicle that you finance with your bank through a traditional method and there's a lien against it. It's when ADOT puts those liens in there, and we need a better system to actually be able to see when they put a lien against the title. I think there's an application here. We could utilize smart contracts for the lenders to release the liens. Currently, we do have an e-lien system in Arizona, electronic liens, and they can be released as well. I think there's a better application that still is a manual system where you got to do some clicking around, inputting information. I think there's a use to utilize the smart contracts, and tying into a lender system should be able to automate the release of that lien too when an account is paid in full. View the history of mileage and registrations. It's public knowledge where a vehicle's been registered in different states in the country. The mileage is obviously public knowledge as well. It's printed right on the title. But in this case, I'm talking about Can we see what state the birthplace of this vehicle was? Has it been in a state that's prone to rust? We in Arizona, we don't like rust because we don't have humidity, so we're not used to it on our cars. We don't want those rust state vehicles. History of mileage, I could probably spend a half hour here of how inaccurate Carfax and AutoCheck are. What motor vehicle allows for mileage discrepancy, how dealers a lot of times can change that mileage. Oh, it's this number. Oops, sorry, it's this number. Change it. It's not as locked in and infallible as you think with mileage. There's also some title washing through certain states. We see that also with flood damaged vehicles, and there's a large hurricane or something like that. We can see vehicles that basically you can run the vehicle and its title. You can transfer through several states, and because they have a difference of information that they track between states, eventually the brand on your title, meaning flood damage, disappears off that title. That's a title washing. So again, I think we can eliminate some fraud there and track that appropriately. Quick and efficient auditing, querying functions for ADOT detectives. Again, I know that's not the most exciting thing. Let's support detectives trying to, I don't know, go out there and find the bad guys. Okay, fine. But the point being, this is something real tangible that impacts our state today. I know we're not all detectives in this room, but I know the Northern Arizona ADOT detective, we're on a first name basis. I know how busy this guy is running all over the place. And I know his steps. Hey, I've been in trouble once or twice as a dealership too. I know how he pulls the film. I know how long it takes him. I mean, we're talking months down the road for this guy to research, to pull information. He'll get a title complaint. He's 6 months till he's first arrested. It takes a lot of time to research and dig all this out. It could be so much quicker for ADOT detectives pulling up the title history and what's going on with this vehicle. On that note, one of the common things an ADOT detective would be chasing around is just this number 10 item here. We can program Arizona statutes into the code, I believe. So something like an individual in Arizona cannot resell more than 4 vehicles a year. I know for a fact that the detective in Northern Arizona is chasing several individuals right now for that very violation. If we had something built in, see, motor vehicle, humans processing that paperwork, they don't know that this is the 5th, 6th, 7th vehicle he's sold this year. So he's continuing to do it while the detective's trying to chase him around. I mean, literally, this is something that has been happening. And so we can do not just this one, but we can program several statutes into the code to prohibit this kind of activity from even being able to take place. So pause there just a second. We've listed the problems, potential blockchain solutions. Questions, comments before I go further? Yeah.
First of all, this is very interesting. Like, you know, I love the use case concept, but this is something that, you know, it's not my profession. It's so interesting to hear about. Now, MVD to me is driver's license, and of course now we've got those silly travel IDs that people are getting. So my guess is they're pretty busy with that. What percentage of MVD physical business, you know, people who walk in the door, is title business versus all the other things they do?
I don't think I could speak to that, honestly.
Okay.
What I could speak to is about a year and a half ago, those the different kinds of cards that you're talking about, they rolled that out to the third-party title companies that can do the registration and titling. They at first couldn't do driver's licenses. Now they can. My friend that owns several of those locations up north has been telling me all about it. That is a small fraction of his business there. And there's very little money in that. The money really for all this is driven off of the VLT, the vehicle license tax. So I couldn't get too close guessing at that, but I'm going to say it's well over 50% is my impression. Yeah.
Who would you say owns the record? So I've got a vehicle that's paid off 100%. Would that vehicle record be under my ownership, encrypted with my permission? You can't see it to see the history for that vehicle, or do you think the state should also have the ability to view the record as well?
I think the state's going to have the ability to view the record.
Probably same with the detectives.
So.
Yeah, they're gonna need to access that as well as, you were speaking to me just before, so tell me your name again? Daniel. And it brought up just the idea of 2 private keys for each VIN. You got the actual owner of record, I own this vehicle and drive it, and then the state would have to have a key to that record as well.
So the police would have that state key, if you will.
Yeah, and if you can imagine, there would have to be the ability of even police officer, I shouldn't just say ADOT, but police officer pulls somebody over, what do? They run your plate, right? Well, that's gonna be in these motor vehicle records. They're looking at who that vehicle's registered to, is it reported stolen, is the name gonna match your driver's license that you're gonna show them?
So, I wouldn't want anybody to just look at my vehicle and say, oh, it was in that flood, look at that damage.
Yeah, so I think what you might be crossing into is just that next section for the considerations. Number 1, is the owner of record public or private information?
Right.
My feeling is that we would probably have to keep the actual owner information private. So I can't go out on the parking lot, write down a VIN number and figure out who's the actual owner of record on that VIN. Now, the state's gonna have to be able to look that up immediately.
But if I'm doing a transfer, he's gonna buy my truck, I want to be able to have an app that says, let's touch keys.
Yeah.
And give him permission for 10 minutes.
Yeah. I would imagine that would be something like you hold the private key for that record, and there's going to be, you initiate some kind of smart contract where, but somehow the system's going to verify you have authority, and he'll be able to tell, okay, you have authority to issue,
Authority to view,
transfer.
authority to transfer, authority to lien. I'm giving him, he's a bank. I'm giving him permission to put a lien.
Yeah. Now, some of that record I think is going to be public. It won't be 100% private. So today I can go write a VIN down in the parking lot, and I can do a query on ADOT's website, but I'm not going to get who's actually the owner of it. I can find out if there's a lien against it, traditional lien like with a bank. We can find that out right
Is
now.
that you as a car dealer owner, or can we do it as private citizens today?
You as an individual can do a little bit of that. In fact, that's in our second page. I think I have a couple links, dealer and private individuals. Yeah, you've had your hand up a little bit.
Yeah, so I just left California because the DMV is kind of how the state balances its budget. And so I bought a new car just last month, and I sold my car, and I really wish that we had had exactly what you're talking about, because I lost $1,500 on the sale of my car. They ran a Carfax check and the mileage was wrong. The last guy in California that did my smog check put 122,000 miles on my car. My car had just rolled into 100,000 miles. So the guy got freaked out. And then we had a Craigslist deal going for me to sell the car. He was terrific. I'm honest, it was a clean title, I'm the only owner that had California plates. But to make a long story short, I really wish the system had been in place, because it literally cost me a sale of, $1,500.
Yeah.
But what I want to circle back, and you already touched on, Carfax, and then Equifax also has, so you put in the VIN number and you get all the details.
Yeah.
It'd be nice in what you're talking about to bring together these history, the Carfax history,
Yeah.
the Equifax, and the insurer, because now insurers are changing to vehicle miles traveled for your insurance. And you can actually, within the system, document that you're not a heavy driver. Like I drive less than 6,000 miles a year.
Yeah.
And you also talked about streamlining and maximizing efficiencies with titles and fraud. But what I want to know is, how can you, where does interstate commerce come in? Where, if this system goes into play, you're talking strictly with Arizona, but I'm California, new to Arizona, and I bought my car in California and had it shipped over, and everything so far I've dealt with was California until I got my Arizona plate. So where does interstate commerce come into something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have a little bullet point in here about that. First of all, glad you moved from California to Arizona. So,
Me too.
California motor vehicle is
Love the Arizona.
worse than Arizona to deal with. We have to deal with them every now and then too. But And just a quick note on the like the mileage discrepancy. What that sounds like, I've seen it 100 times through my dealership. People bringing in trade-ins. Individual goes into motor vehicle, they're filling out some kind of form. Is it for titling? Is it getting a duplicate title? Whatever. And motor vehicle requires them to put down the current mileage on the vehicle. Well, I didn't know I needed that. I just ran in here and I was asking, you know, how to transfer the title or how to get a duplicate title. And it's very common. I've heard overwhelming amount of stories. They say, oh, just write down whatever you think it's close to. You can TM you a vehicle, true miles unknown, that quick. I've just seen awful practices with that. It should be exact. It should be looking at the odometer, but that's exactly how that happens. Motor vehicle, I've seen it in multiple states. They just encourage them, oh, just guess at what the mileage is on the vehicle. You know, then they guess high and you get a whole problem there. But
For me, it was
comment for
simple
that.
because I keep really good records of the maintenance on my car. And because I was selling it, I pulled the records of the maintenance of my car to show whoever was gonna buy it. So I was able to just fax, Carfax and Experian the last, like, you know,
Yeah, to
service
get
on
that
my car.
correct.
I'm like, look at the mileage, you know?
Yeah.
And they fixed it right away, but it doesn't matter because the guy got so spooked, he didn't want to deal with it. He was already paranoid. It was Craigslist, blah, blah, blah. And it cost me $1,500.
Yeah.
If I could make a couple comments about some of the things that have come up in this conversation. Number one, you're talking about the interstate compatibility, let's say, of just the motor vehicle department records and the way they operate and whatever. I think that's a huge area for improvement, where each state is running its own construct right now for motor vehicle departments, title, automobile title, and so forth. They're not compatible. They're not, you know, there's no connectivity between the two of them. And I think part of our innovation opportunity is to start to stand up something like this and to start to experiment with how might it interface not only with the legacy motor vehicle title registry in Arizona, but also with the others in other states. Because somebody was talking just before the session started about upgrading legacy code. Well, this is a similar problem of how do we upgrade the legacy systems that are out there already, how do we bring them into the contemporary? And I think the blockchain is definitely a way to do that. And by the way, this is not confined to motor vehicle records. It's the same problem set for land registries. I just spoke to a real estate technology conference in February, and there were, you know, people that work for title companies up there saying, hey, every title, you know, construct is different in every state. Last month we had an attorney from Vermont. They did the first real estate transaction incorporated in blockchain. It's the same thing. It's like they're all different. And there's a huge amount of efficiency and benefits that can come from a, you know, interoperable construct between registries. So the points you're bringing up are perfect. And so anything you would like to say about that?
Yeah, I was here last month. I thought the Scottsdale realtor, who's got the firm of 24 agents already being on it, is ahead of the game. She's in the perfect place because cybersecurity is based out of Scottsdale. So she's kind of in the hornet's nest of a lot of developing innovation. And it was cool to hear what the guy from Vermont is doing, but he's got ties to Arizona. So
You
we're
just
kinda
said a blasphemous statement
what was
that
that?
cybersecurity is based in Scottsdale.
Oh, Tempe.
Others would disagree.
That's across the hall.
Chandler. I was up there last night.
Right. So thank you for bringing that up, and I think this surfaces some of the use cases, and it's not just use case. This is not just code, because what we're talking about is the opportunity to innovate on the human interface side and the user story side. That's the real opportunity, because a lot of this blockchain magic and mojo it looks so promising, but real humans aren't interfacing with it right now. And part of what we're talking about is something called multi-signature opportunities, where you have some combination, 2 of 3 can interact with the system on like an agency basis. So that's another point that I think we're bringing up in this conversation. But Drew, I'll get to your question in just a moment, but Drew is going to be here on Saturday. He's one of the developers that's going to be part of the Arizona Blockathon. Who else is going to be, you guys are going to be part of it. Joseph's going to be part of it. Jason will be here. So the opportunity set is really to experiment with some of these real life problems, you know, privacy, which you're bringing up. What happens, my wife just joined us, Cindy, what happens if something happens to Jay? How can Cindy and the bank or the, you know, the dealership act on Jay's behalf? How do we put in all those safeguards? All those things are huge opportunity sets. So that's part of what we have on the table to experiment with, put in the hands of real people and say, okay, what do you think of this? How would this work? What are your concerns? What do you like about it? So forth. Just like what you said, saying you wish you had this like a month or 2 ago. So, Drew, I'm sorry you had.
No, not a problem. So were you done with your presentation, or is there more? Can I ask more about this? Or?
Yeah. I mean, if you want me to cover a little more.
We're still going to scroll through a few more points. But
Okay. Well, my question is, you know, I heard in the beginning, you know, hey, this use case doesn't make sense for blockchain. It's more of a centralized database solution, which is true. However, being a car dealer, I think it would make sense for you to do it in a database. You know, you have control on all that stuff. But if you start doing it on blockchain just for your dealership, that's your foot in the door, because you're never going to be able to go to the state of Arizona and say, hey, switch over to this blockchain. I know it's emerging technology and I know it's a big leap, but you know, you're never going to get them to make that change. But I think if you start doing it on your own personal level and then start to build it and expand it with a roadmap and then introduce it into more dealerships and then get a conglomerate of dealerships and then eventually title, you know, these title companies are, you know,
To reach this critical mass.
right. And then the DMV will say, you got something going here. We see the momentum.
Okay. And just a note on the centralized, decentralized database. My initial idea actually wasn't even anything to do with motor vehicle titles. It was about short-term leases and a payment system. So things like that we'd kind of gone through and it's like, you know what, this really isn't a good blockchain application. But yeah, then started looking at some of the motor vehicle titles.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of that because at least architecturally, like a lot of stuff looks cool, but I don't see anything where you would need a blockchain for this because the state of Arizona is going to, you know, handle all the title transfers. If you're talking about going to a system that's electronic, the way blockchain will benefit this is if other producers are putting data into the blockchain. Like they have permission to write records of whatever type.
Yeah.
That can also be queried by other users. But if it's just, you know, facilitating title transfers, then yeah, you wouldn't really need anything.
I think I do have a section in here that speaks to, can we have multiple users and not have this just centrally managed by the state? But I get what you're getting at there. Does it really need to be blockchain, or is it just still a centralized database? Let me continue through a few more of these points, because actually a lot of these questions, comments are they're at least touched on in some more of these points, and I appreciate some of the feedback and comments you guys have given. So we'll move into the additional considerations. You can see point number 1 there is the owner of record, public or private information. I put that as a question mark for consideration of more of what's the data we're putting in here. What would the state say to being public or private? The actual owner of record, I think, would have to remain private, but other data like mileage, the current mileage, could be public. And that's the point where Daniel had come up, giving me the idea as well about, you know, multiple parties with keys. So if the state needs to access the record and see who exactly the owner is, and the owner has a private key to it as well. Item 2 there need to be some kind of, I know there's so much conversation of blockchains are immutable. There would need to be some kind of mechanism for error correction, even if it's adding on to the blockchain. Even if we're significantly reducing the error rate, it's gonna happen at some point. So that would have to be built in as a provision. Number 3, there, maybe I'm a little harsh on the wording, but can the software be idiot-proof so individuals are permitted to interact with the blockchain for a private sale? That's where I'm starting to hint towards your point of, I'd like this to be something where we don't have to go into the brick and mortar motor vehicle location. Can the network be built in such a way where we as the community of individuals can interact with it and actually affect transactions to happen? Scaling's been an issue for a number of the cryptocurrencies, and I don't know the technical side mathematically why they can't scale, but this one I don't think causes us a scaling issue because, and I literally thought through the number of minutes, seconds in a day dealers and tried to just ballpark how many cars are being sold, how many transactions per second. I believe it's well below 1 transaction per second, so we don't have a scaling problem with this type of blockchain use. Number 5, we've already touched on that. The software should have flexibility to incorporate additional states in the future. I think biting off multiple states at once will be a little bit ambitious, but if we could get something set up for Arizona, most or all 50 states operate their motor vehicle departments independently of each other. Different parameters. They do share information, but it's not identical across all states. We've danced around this point already many times. What information does motor vehicle want tied to that record, to that VIN? Insurance. Motor vehicle knows if you're carrying current insurance on your vehicle or not. If you don't believe me, just stop it and they'll send you a nice little note in the mail. Do they want the, does current insurance in force? Are insurers putting information into the blockchain potentially? Do they have it linked to driver's license number? There's other information that we could touch on with motor vehicle. And actually the second 2 pages, I have this more for Saturday, but I've got a couple sample titles from the dealership. Most of you recognize this. And if we pay attention to the headings, motor vehicle actually labels all the component parts of a title. Yeah, that's fine. Let that load for just a second. Yeah. Yeah, you can see that at the top, vehicle identification number, that's our VIN, first registered. See this one here, since I've talked about it a couple times. This is actually a duplicate title. This is the original title number prior to this, and then we had to get a duplicate title, so this actually supersedes it. Dates the vehicle's title. Here's the film number, previous film number where this was stored. Probably a little more information on these titles than maybe some of you were aware of, but those are just the component parts that I'm sure at a minimum ADOT motor vehicle would need to see in there.
If this is your actual car, Matt, I saw somebody driving it away.
Yeah.
Sessions.
Yeah, right. Do you have a question?
Yeah, you said earlier that obviously closing of MDV offices would be a big savings, and that's going to be good. You said earlier that they get a small fee when you query their site. Do you think that revenue stream is enough that they would not want to do that, or is that like insignificant, you think, to the state?
I don't think it's a revenue generator just because query a record, it's typically about $1.50. It seems pretty insignificant. I don't honestly know how many users in the state are using the website. We as a dealership processing many more transactions than the average individual, we don't use the site a lot for queries. We use it to calculate vehicle license tax to charge the consumer, but we don't actually do a lot of queries. We do a few, but I don't think that's real widely used by the public. But I don't know exactly what the revenue stream is. I think it's more in the actual vehicle license taxes where the money is. Yeah, back there. item number 7 there. I've been going back and forth on this. Happy to see what can be discussed in this at the Blockathon on Saturday, maybe see what you guys have to say in this room. But I think I could argue this either way. Is this potentially less of a decentralized model, more like XRP or Ripple? That's that's top number 4 cryptocurrency. If you're unfamiliar with them, they have developed a lot of relationships with the banks across the globe. And it's not truly decentralized because it's being controlled. It's still centralized in the big banks across the globe. So my question here would be, and I think it gets at the heart of what you were saying, is this something where it's not fully decentralized? It's at the state level. Motor vehicle dealers, because motor vehicle dealers are licensed, bonded, and insured. We're held to standards with the state. Third-party title companies, again, held to standards with the state for accuracy, for how they process their paperwork. They have certain tests with them, so they're held to certain standards. So does it look something like that, where it's not fully state-owned, but it's not truly fully decentralized? Or can we develop something that is truly decentralized, that is runs off of the code, and individuals all across our state interact with it regularly? The state's going to have some type of developmental control when there needs to be upgrades to the code, whatever. But could we decentralize it even more to the individuals in the state? I don't have a firm answer for that. That's a little bit of a question, I think, more for this group. Yeah.
So, I think you have to have it centralized if you're going to regulate who can access and control the master keys, whatever, for the state, for example. Otherwise, if it's an open platform where anyone can come in and modify a record or create a record, then it can be decentralized, but I don't think that would work right.
Yeah, although creating a record, you would have to own the private key to a bin on that blockchain, I would think, to initiate or complete one of those records. Otherwise, you wouldn't have permission to edit it, I would think. Again, I'm speaking just slightly over my own head because I'm not a developer.
But you still need some kind of administrative layer if someone loses a key,
yeah,
etc.
Agreed. Yeah.
If you have a dealer that goes out of good standing, you want to revoke their keys, you have to have some kind of.
There has to be some level of
right.
authority there at the state level. Yeah, I agree.
This is bringing up a great point, and I'm kind of going through a transformation as we're having this conversation, because up until about 5 minutes ago, I've been a blockchain purist. It's been, for me, blockchain, the term has occurred like it's got to be open, it's got to be permissionless, it's got to be transparent. That Ripple thing is not really a blockchain, blah, blah, blah.
It's the black sheep of all the
That's right.
It really is.
But kind of what's opening up is, well, wait a second. What really matters is what works. And, so I'm letting go of this purist position of it's got to be permissionless. It's got to be Bitcoin and kind of Ethereum. And I think that's another opportunity set that we've got, is to relax at least my purist view on blockchain and say, well, how much better could the motor vehicle department be if it was something like a Ripple or a Dash or whatever, where you've got kind of a hybrid peer-to-peer, but still somewhat centralized.
I think with our society growing up with such a centralized focus, it's harder to break out these use cases in a fully decentralized model. I think that's why some of these may lend themselves to kind of decentralized, kind of not really, and you got to maintain some authority centralized. I think it's kind of building off of our existing systems.
Well, and as you relax that parameter of, the purist view of blockchain, all of a sudden you start to increase the scalability, and you can increase the speed of the transactions. But there is a trade-off between this purist, decentralized blockchain notion and the centralized constructs.
Yeah.
Not only that, the technology is advancing so fast. There's no real winner right now.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to use a part of that construct to create a power of attorney for individuals to grant other people to sign for them. Because that's a common theme in business, right? Whether it's real estate or cars. And I've done a lot of fleet transactions, and you regularly have to create
always a power of attorney. Yeah.
From the owner of the corporation. You designate somebody, and you technically revoke all other power of attorneys, and you want to keep the key just on your system, and all you want to do is verify that it exists, because you can't really check the signature when you're at the DMV. It seems to me that that would be one of the agency functions of blockchain, that you would want to reside on a private server, and all you want to do is verify that the agency exists and is valid.
Well, that's a great point, Mark. And it's, again, highlights the human interface factor of this technology. There's a big opportunity to innovate in that human interface side, which is, power of attorney, agency, multi-sig constructs, all those things are on the horizon for refinement and development and innovation, for making this really scalable and really adopted by the general population. And it's not only here in the United States, it's all over the world. There are countries that are literally in the process right now of of at least looking at and putting a lot of money into putting their entire public administration on blockchain constructs. And a lot of the things, I would call them user stories that we're talking about, are fundamental to the whole thing actually working.
I'm going to run through this second page just a little quicker. See, there are other projects and initiatives. The Arizona Upgrade Initiative. I did a little research on this. It was actually released to us dealerships last year. We hadn't gotten logged into it yet, but I did just in the last couple weeks. At first, I was thinking, oh, are they already starting to solve their own problems here with motor vehicle titles? And so I really had to question this a little bit and say, do I have a use case here, or is Arizona well on their way? And I came full circle to really, I think what's going on here is Arizona's at the cusp. They're recognizing a lot of their inefficiencies, and they're trying to improve this process. And they're very early stages. They're rolling out a pilot program just to dealers right now. It's a very limited system. I've been in there, worked with it just a little bit. It's not great. I mean, we can work with about 5 or 6 different fields in there, but I thought the importance of looking at that, it's not about the system they're rolling out or trying to build, the point being that Arizona's already looking in this direction. It may not be blockchain per se. They're looking for a digital solution for their title process. So actually, I think it might be very good timing for us to approach someone at the state level and say, hey, what are you working on with electronic titles? We may be able to bring you a valid prototype for it.
And to kind of circle back to the resistance that I've encountered so far regarding putting, business use cases out in the open and for open source, we probably don't have that in a state motor vehicle construct like this, where that hesitation is probably not going to be a big deal. The other thing that's happening, that just happened either this week or last week, is California is starting to get on the blockchain bandwagon. And one of their legislators has introduced legislation in California that's similar to what's, Arizona's been ahead of the game like a year or two. So we've got Nevada that's very hungry for being at the forefront of blockchain, Colorado, Wyoming, other states, Illinois, I think North Carolina, and now California's starting to wake up. So, creating something that kind of works, that especially policymakers and incumbent public administration people can actually put their hands on and see how it works, that goes a long, long way to getting them on board for this type of innovation. It goes much, much further than any kind of, writing papers and anything else. Until people actually get their hands on something and see how it works, it's, you might as well be speaking Martian in many cases, so.
All right. A couple of these on the second page are a little bit more information for the actual Saturday Blockathon teams. There's a frequently asked questions link for the current upgrade they're working on. We've just got question marks there of other Ethereum initiatives that are trying to utilize some kind of smart contract situation here, other projects that might be going on. We did pull out a couple examples. There's one one link there is from Estonia. Jay's talked about country Estonia and what they're they're putting this citizenship on. They're doing e-citizenship. Is that right?
Yeah, e-residency is the name of their
residency.
Their initiative. Let's see. Just open it. So Estonia they are experimenting in this realm, but it's much more than just vehicle title in Estonia. They're putting land title, all sorts of information and use cases and public administration on the blockchain, including they have launched something called e-residency, where for something like $500 and a visit to their embassy or whatever, you could become sort of a resident of Estonia. And that brings up a whole realm that's opening up called global citizenship. Using blockchain, we could actually have like multiple citizenships. Sort of like a ship at sea that flies different flags of origin. That could become available to us as global citizens. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, item 6 there, that's just the YouTube video that we had opened up with. Item number 7 there, potential uses with, I think you had put that item on there, probably thinking about could the database be housed with IPFS potentially. A couple specific examples for the developers potentially on Saturday, just as simple as transfer title from A to B, from Alice to Bob. Adding a lien to that vehicle for a loan company, and then can the loan company release that lien? Jay's mentioned a couple times already about potential having multi-signatures at released lien. And then another component, I don't have this fully worked out in my head of how this would work, but this is where we start getting into think a little bit about what this could be, how could we improve it? Can we add a notification function where you own the private key to this vehicle? Our recall system in this country is a disaster, and we just had more recalls than we ever had a couple of years ago. And then last year we had more recalls than we've ever had in our history. And I'll bet you in another year or two, we're gonna have more recalls than we've ever had in our history. We're producing a lot of vehicles, they're complex, they're gonna have a lot of recalls. How do we notify people? It's quite a mess right now of how people actually get notified where those motor vehicle registries are, registries, where they're registered at the point in time. I get hundreds of recall notices at my dealerships for vehicles I don't own. Somebody else owns them. They just don't have the registration information correct for sending out those recalls. Insurance lapse, again, I already mentioned that motor vehicles tracking that's the law. You gotta have some level of minimum insurance on there. Can there be a notification if insurance is coming to an end, if there is a lapse, something to that effect? Current process, that's just a couple links. We won't go over all that, but that's more for the teams to be able to see what ADOT has published for current process. And And then the general prototypes specifications. Again, I think some good things for the blockathon potential teams to answer. What could it look like building a prototype for this? Estimated time to build it out. And then possible collaborators. I think this is fun to think, dream a little bit how this could evolve. You got ADOT, yes. Auto title companies, the third-party title companies right now. Lenders, dealers, we've talked about all those. Auto manufacturers. Auto repair shops. Another type of lien we haven't talked about is a mechanic's lien. When you take your vehicle into a repair shop and you sign a little piece of paper that says, yes, you can work on my vehicle, state statute says there's now a mechanic's lien against your vehicle. It's not filed, it's not on paper anywhere. Technically, it's in force. It's in first position even. If your lender, if you haven't been paying your loan and your lender comes to repo your vehicle at the auto repair shop, guess what? They can't take it. The lender actually doesn't have first position, the mechanic's lien does. Now, why don't we see mechanic's liens filed anywhere in Arizona? Well, I've wanted to file a few. What did I do? I went to my friend who owns a third-party title company, said, I will pay you, help me file a mechanic's lien and take possession of this piece of collateral. He said, frankly, if it's not worth $15,000 or more, it's not worth your time and effort. It is so cumbersome in this state to actually enforce a mechanic's lien. Again, a little piece there. But I think our auto repair shops, not just the dealerships, but repair shops as a whole, is there a feature there where they could lien the vehicle or make loans on those repairs because people can't always pay for all of it? Can they input a mechanic's lien quickly and efficiently?
Which is kind of an interesting business opportunity that sort of bubbled up out of this process.
Yeah.
If this were in place and if it were more efficient, it might open up a whole new realm of financing for automobile repairs for people that could use that financing to fix their vehicles.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
You had a question.
Well, I have a suggestion with regard to funding. Everything that you're talking about from everything that I lived through the last 3-4 months keeps going back to Carfax and Experian, where they actually have these records. They're like interlopers you don't know about unless you fall into, selling your car. And I don't even remember them, existing 15 years ago, which is the last time I bought a car. So I didn't even know that someone had been building a record on my car until I had to deal with this issue.
Yeah.
Maybe what you're talking about kind of touches on their business model. You're kind of.
There's a little bit of crossover, isn't there? Yeah.
So why not approach them? Why not approach Carfax and Experian, because they're highly funded, well-funded entities, and see if they would fund a case study or they would fund a $10,000 or $15,000 spend and bring them in early, as like a collaborator, because technically speaking, you're kind of poaching. If we develop what we're talking about, you're not going to need these folks. You're putting them out.
That's another dilemma that I've run into in bringing up this conversation about basically approaching incumbent companies and industries about posting these use cases. It's kind of a schizophrenic conversation because on one hand, they definitely want to see what's coming down the line. They're all awake to it. On the other hand, they're kind of in denial and they kind of want it to go away because it's a sort of scary thing that's more of a threat than an opportunity. And, so I'm not quite sure how to overcome that hurdle in addition to like the intellectual property hurdle.
So here's you've got two folks that I know of, and there might be more you'll know, but you've got Carfax, and that strikes exactly what you're talking about. That's going to be like a panic mode.
Yeah.
Holy moly. But you've got Experian. Experian is a data aggregator that sells your credit data, your bank. They have multiple streams of business revenue. So they might be the first approach, because if you're like, it's just car registry, they have a whole other data set parameter where they generate revenue from,
Well, I'll say it right now publicly. This is recorded and everything. We would love to work with the incumbent industries and companies. My reception so far has been like, if we could turn back the clock maybe 8 or 9 years, it would have been like going to Yellow Cab and saying, hey, we got this great app that's gonna open up ride sharing. Would you like to experiment with it? It's called Uber. And then I'm like, no. Or go to Marriott Hotels and say, hey, we've got this way that people can rent their houses. No.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to fund this prototyping and innovation because unless there's like an immediate revenue stream, it's hard to fund this. And so far, the appetite, and we really haven't given it a chance, but the appetite so far has not been like, oh, this is great. You know, we'll throw 5, 10, 15, 25K into this. This is much, much better than trying to go out and hire, 20, 30 blockchain developers or turn your legacy staff into blockchain developers. But, and it might be changing. I've seen some major healthcare companies that are now setting up camp in some of the collaborative workspaces. And that's a good sign. So anyway, that's my little soapbox pitch.
But it's the big guys doing it. It's the big guys.
It's the big guys.
Big guys to create a big solution for a big
Right.
problem.
Right. And we've had Hyperledger as part of the Desert blockchain, and you don't have to look any farther than R3, $200 million by a 70-member banking consortium that basically failed. So, yeah.
Why don't you guys go to talk to the title companies that do private titles like First American? They got coders over here on 44th Street and Washington that are doing all the databases, and they don't have to talk to the state at all. And they're very much interested in finding a way to streamline their process flow because they already have escrow and agency built into their existing systems with audit. It seems like that would be the natural person to be able to fund something like that and to benefit from it immediately. Plus, if I could give them a competitive edge that other title companies wouldn't have, and you would just say, look, if you let us help you develop this for title loans and title transfers and escrow, we can bring a revenue stream for you doing automotive titles and other fleet kinds of things that you normally would not benefit from that would be added to your benefit. Because once you create the title escrow machine that is very common, it is applicable into multiple industries.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's a great point, Mark, and I'll follow up with those folks for sure. And anybody else that has ideas, love to hear them. But,
just to speak to a couple of those things that you'd answer to, my answers would run parallel with you. That vehicle history, the Carfaxes of the world, I think there's a real good application for blockchain there. That's not specifically what this was pointed at. I think ADOT would not want to get involved with the whole history of maintenance of the vehicle and all. They're more providing the service for title transference, registration, following the laws. I think to his point, it's if you got $100 million to launch a new company, try to be a vehicle history report company and put it on a blockchain. I think you got a viable idea there. This is a little bit more about what could be real and tangible that we could create here at a little bit more local level and actually get it off the ground. We've got, I hear you about to get the state to move, but to change something, but we've got a number of individuals as part of this meetup group that have contacts and connections at the state level and legislators. And that's why I think if we got a working prototype for this, Arizona's already working on their title system. They know it's not very efficient. They're trying to improve it. They're trying to make it more electronic. I think we join that conversation, and we've got we've got a few individuals and contacts that I think would have a reasonable chance at actually affecting change there, where love the idea of vehicle history reports and tracking that on a blockchain. I think that's a real good application. I just didn't go that far because you really need to start at a national level, I think, at that. Vehicles are crossing the state lines all the time, and need to carry that vehicle history report, what have you, with it.
James?
Bit of an idea. It's not too fleshed out because I'll live in 5 minutes, but it's more food for thought. Don't know much about cars, but I do know that cars are getting smarter. And I'm thinking that maybe your application can be, put onto smart cars to kind of help it be a little decentralized, where they keep their own ledgers or wallets, and do some sort of validation too, kind of like cellular network, something like that.
Yeah.
With everything keep it safe. Would be a nightmare for scalability, but I feel like that's something that, you might want to consider.
Yeah, I agree. The technology in the cars needs to be built out just a little more, but we'd actually had a video here from a previous meetup, Oaken Innovations out of Texas, and they're doing some interesting applications of blockchain and autonomous vehicles, using a Raspberry Pi hooked up to the vehicle. And I think there's going to be some fantastic uses in the 2020s around smart vehicles or autonomous vehicles and blockchain. Yeah, and a lot of it, like other companies creating, your car needs to be a wallet. If you want it to autonomously go park itself, pay for parking, pick something up, it needs to be able to pay. It needs to have its own wallet to issue payment when nobody's there to do it for. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, we are in the, a hotbed for autonomous vehicle innovation. And people are looking at a blockchain construct as to be sort of like the air traffic controller for autonomous vehicles and other things, the Internet of Things. So, so there's definitely opportunity to experiment and innovate. I'm going to be speaking on May the 3rd at a cybersecurity conference on blockchain, IoT, and cybersecurity. So that's one of the points that I want to make, is that this decentralized trust construct might very well be sort of like the traffic controller for a lot of this stuff. So, Jason.
I've got some recommendations if you want to think about how you would rapidly prototype this. So I think you mentioned a few times that the transactions per second isn't really a problem. So if it were to be pursued that you want to prototype this, I would definitely say that Ethereum is probably your best bet.
Okay. Yeah.
You can, I would say that this entire title system, the title itself can be represented by a non-fungible token in Ethereum. So
a non-what?
A non-fungible token. So what it means is you hear a lot about ERC20. That's by and far every token that's out there right now. A non-fungible token means that every token has unique qualities. So the title, or Nori, for instance, we use it to distinguish different types of carbon removal certificates.
Okay.
So it has like some kind of event information associated with it, value attributes, etc. ERC20s, they don't. They're all they're all the same thing. So if you put the title instead of a non-fungible, that's a good way to start. Then I think, so based on some of the requirements you had, there are certain needs that you might need for locking a title based on certain types of circumstances, when it's trading it, when it's been traded and then needs to be just kind of like temporarily retired, etc. You can extend that non-fungible token idea to have like a lock. After it's been transferred, it initiates this locking mechanism.
Okay.
So that's employed internally at Nori as well. When like a carbon removal certificate has been transferred once, it cannot fundamentally be traded again.
Yeah.
You can see it in your balance, but you try to initiate the transaction and it fails, it falls back.
Because you've already removed that carbon, you've already accounted for that. Yeah.
Right. Then you can, on the topic also on transferring, you can set up like an intermediary smart contract, like an escrow contract, where you deposit the the title into this escrow. And there's no middleman that necessarily controls that entity or that smart contract. It just it might sit in there until it's received another type of event. So to put that into kind of context, and I keep going back to Nori, but that's just because that's what I know. We have like a decentralized exchange contract that sits in between the transfer of these carbon removal non-fungibles for some other currency. So if you had titles and Ether or whatever it is, you deposit the decentralized contract, the market sits in between. It can listen and kind of subscribe to whenever it hears about somebody wanting to sell or transfer their title. Then as soon as—
You can actually create a marketplace for supply and demand?
Yeah. And then whenever somebody tries to purchase that title, you can have certain types of events automatically initiate based on somebody's selling their title and somebody buying the title. So maybe it's like a 10-hour lock or some other kind of mechanism. Then you also had requirements for the liens. So when we talk about, when I mention this non-fungible thing and I say that there's attributes for every token or title token, if you want to call it that, you could assign a value attribute for that thing. So maybe it's a $20,000 title, but every so often a lien gets put onto it. You still own your title, you can still see your title. Everybody maybe can see your title, depending on whatever privacy implications there are. The difference being that people with permissions to apply liens onto your non-fungible title, it would decrement or increment the value upwards and downwards based on the lien amount. So the other thing is you can also accomplish some kind of quasi-decentralization, not really decentralized, but might be able to nullify some of the implications of not having that ability to say that this person can definitely do this, but this person definitely cannot. You can use something called identity contracts. So Uport kind of is the first one who was able to do something like this pretty efficiently. They're a big identity company in the Ethereum space. The idea is something like everybody has an identity smart contract that represents who they are and the different permissions they can invoke, or the different functions on smart contracts they can invoke. So rather than me sending transactions and invoking functionalities on the title itself, I can invoke the transaction on these generalized identity contracts, and then that contract can forward it on to wherever it needs to go. The benefit of that is that you accomplish permissions similar to like how operating systems work, in that if you had an admin of the system, they can blacklist and whitelist public keys from being able to invoke certain types of permissions based on laws changing or whatever it might be. Or somebody gaming the system, etc. The alternative to that approach, to accomplish something similar, is to use like a plasma chain. So in Ethereum, there's this proposal that we probably won't see for 6 to 12 months that allows for having like chains on top of chains, where what it accomplishes is you can participate in these kind of like local versus, like if you consider the main Ethereum blockchain to be like a federal government, then you can imagine all these chains that sit on top of it to be more like local,
like state chains or
municipal, etc. Then you have all kinds of things that happen, and people can choose to enter and leave those types of chains. And then just at certain increments, they then apply the state back to the federal level. So the notion is that, people in the real world have disputes all the time. You don't necessarily need to go to the federal level. You don't need to go to the Supreme Court to settle some very small claim dispute. You settle it in the plasma chain and then apply that, or you kind of propose to apply that back to the federal level when necessary. And I think that was all my notes that I took.
So we're gonna have to wrap it up, unfortunately, but sorry to cut you off, Mark. Go ahead while I'm trying to.
I had a counter to that. I don't think I would use Ethereum at all for this. I would use Hyperledger Fabric. So your points like all hold up, except that for the MVB and for third parties to be involved, they have to manage Ether, the transaction currency, in order to make anything happen on the system. So with Fabric is it doesn't use cryptocurrency. Instead, each participant has, public-private key pair, and their permission is permission blockchain versus Ethereum, where you have to have permission in order to interact with it. So if I was building a prototype for this, another benefit of Fabric is that you define the shape of your transaction. So versus, Ethereum, where you pay for storage of data on a smart contract, you pay for data in however you're providing that blockchain, that Fabric instance, however you shape that data. So basically what I'm saying is you pay for storage on your cloud provider or wherever, you're not going to pay for storage just to rent that storage on the blockchain itself. That also obviously puts some limitations on how fast you can query data back out of the system. But in general, with what was described up here, you end up with something permission where you can say, okay, well, auto loan company, you have permission to write a lien, but you don't have permission to even arbitrarily view other customer records that you're not involved in, for example. And the MVD, can have control over that. But a lot of the stuff that was talked about, we could spin up on the blockchain architecture, and it's actually pretty straightforward with your system and with what I'm proposing. And other stuff people can come up with. But what's interesting is that onboarding other parties into the system, that's way more harder than the blockchain use case itself. And I think that's probably what you want to explore overall is how easy is it going to be to adapt legacy systems, but also if something is blockchainified, if you're talking about handing out wallets or if you're talking about handing out private keys, you have to have something that is grandma friendly for the most part in order for people to be able to interact with it. So I would just caution that, I guess, overall.
So we do have to wrap it up. We're at the end of our time, but what this conversation has opened up, I think, is and we'll bring this up on Saturday, but kind of what's bubbling up is instead of having the teams go out and just kind of create their own little projects, we might take this, and Martha said, you form a team and maybe do it on Hyperledger. Maybe Jason or Julian does it with Ethereum blockchain, and maybe somebody else takes like Naive Coin or something like that and just does it like bare bones basic from scratch. But and we'll talk about this on Saturday, but I'm kind of like in this idea or this direction better than what we did last time, where we just kind of threw it out and it was, kind of random, because I think this could be really, really cool to get into some of the deep components of the human factor, human interface, and onboarding, and all that sort of thing. So
yeah, I think we just need a few more questions answered on the, some of the things that were question marks, just a bit clearer idea of where that is, and then
Cool. So to wrap that up, if you are planning to be here Saturday, I would say I've been going through and basically kind of vetting the people that have signed up. And I would say maybe we've got 20, 25 qualified developers. If you know of somebody else you can invite that is qualified, please do so. So that we can, we're going to have an awesome event, no doubt about it. And just from the conversation in the last 20 minutes, you could see that we've got awesome talent in this room. But this is really an opportunity to bring developers together and designers together and to learn from one another, to share your ideas, and then to build something. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks. Thank you.
Oh,
yes.
Yes. Thank you, Matt. And we will, so we'll have, I think, May 25th, whatever the last Wednesday is, we'll have our next monthly session, and it's highly likely we'll be at a new location. Don't know where yet. And then we will also have another Arizona Blockathon at the end of July 28th, I think.
May 30th.
May 30th?
Yeah.
Yes, May 30th.
And then I think July 28th for our next Arizona Blockathon. So thanks for coming, and thanks for everybody's participation.
I got hit by it. Yeah, but I am gonna work on it.